Snow fell without mercy. The alien girl sat in the freezing white night, her arms wrapped tightly around her small pet. The little creature shook in her hands, weak and cold, its breathing shallow. She pressed it closer to her chest, trying to give it warmth. But her own body was shivering. Her lips were blue, her eyes filled with tears. She whispered, voice breaking, "Just one last hug, just one goodbye." The pet gave a soft sound, almost like a sigh, as if it understood her words. The forest around her was silent, only the sound of wind passing through broken trees. Every shadow looked like a monster. Every gust of wind felt like a warning. She was alone, completely alone, with no fire, no food, and no hope. Her people had abandoned her. They had called her useless, a burden, and left her to die in the cold. She had accepted her fate. Death was already close. She could feel it in her bones. The only thing she wanted was for her pet not to die alone. The creature licked her hand weakly. Its eyes, once full of life, were dim now. She stroked its head with trembling fingers. "I love you," she whispered, voice breaking. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you." Her tears froze on her cheeks. Her arms tightened as if she could hold back death by hugging tighter. She closed her eyes, waiting for the end. Then, a sound, crunch, snow under boots, heavy, steady, not like the light steps of a hunter, but strong, heavy, human. Her heart stopped. Fear shot through her. Her people had always told her stories about humans, wild, brutal creatures who fought without mercy. She had never seen one up close, only from a distance in battles. And now one was coming closer. She pressed her pet tighter, hiding her face in its fur. Maybe if she stayed still, the human would pass by. Maybe he wouldn't notice her. But the footsteps grew louder, closer. Each one echoed in her chest like a drum beat. A shadow fell over her. The girl raised her eyes slowly. A tall figure stood in the snow. The man was wrapped in a thick, dark coat, his breath steaming in the icy air. His face was partly hidden under a hood, but his eyes shone sharply in the pale moonlight. His gaze fell on her, then on the small creature in her arms. For a moment, he didn't move. He just stood there, watching her. Her body tensed. If he attacked, she had no strength to run. She could not fight. She could not even stand. She was ready to die with her pet in her arms. But the man did not raise a weapon. Instead, he slowly crouched down, lowering himself to her level. His voice was deep, but soft. "You'll freeze here," he said, words strange but clear enough for her to understand. His eyes studied the small creature trembling in her arms. "And so will that little one." Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to answer. Her people had told her humans were liars, tricksters, dangerous. But there was something in his tone. Not anger, not cruelty. Something warmer. She shook her head weakly, pulling back a little. "Go, leave us," she whispered. The man did not move away. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a thick blanket. He placed it gently around her shoulders. She gasped as warmth touched her frozen skin. Her pet whimpered softly, snuggling deeper into her arms under the blanket. "Hold still," the man said. His hands moved carefully, never too fast, never threatening. He took off one glove and pressed his warm palm against the creature's small body, sharing his heat. The girl stared in shock. Why was he helping? Why would a human care about her or her pet? Her lips trembled. She wanted to ask, but her voice failed. She only watched him, wide-eyed, as he worked. His breath was steady, his movements calm, like someone who had done this many times before. The wind howled around them, but where he knelt, it felt different, like a shield had formed. His presence filled the empty night with something she hadn't felt in so long. Hope. Her heart fought inside her chest. Part of her screamed to distrust him, to fear him, to run if she could. But another part, the part holding on to life, whispered that maybe, just maybe, he had come for a reason. The man's eyes lifted to meet hers. "You don't want to die here," he said firmly. "Neither does this little one." His gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw no monster in his eyes. Only determination. The girl swallowed hard. Her hands shook as she pulled the blanket tighter around her pet and herself. She wanted to speak, to say thank you, but the words stuck in her throat. The man rose slowly, offering his hand. His figure looked even larger when he stood, his shadow stretching over her. He waited, patient, not forcing her, not demanding, just waiting. Her breath came out in small clouds of steam. She looked at his hand, then at her pet, then back at him. Fear still pressed against her, but so did warmth. If she stayed here, she would surely die. If she trusted him, maybe there was a chance. Her fingers hesitated, hovering in the cold air. Finally, with all the strength she had left, she reached out and touched his hand. His grip was firm, steady, warm. So warm it felt unreal. The human pulled her gently to her feet. She almost fell, but he caught her, holding her steady. Her pet whimpered again, but its body relaxed against her chest, as if it too trusted this strange warmth. The night was still freezing, the forest still dangerous, but something had changed. For the first time, she was not alone. The girl's heart whispered the thought she couldn't say out loud. Maybe death had not come tonight. Maybe life had returned, in the shape of a human. The man's hand was steady as he helped her walk through the snow. Every step felt heavy for the alien girl, her legs shaking with weakness. The little pet whimpered in her arms, but at least it was breathing more evenly now under the blanket. The human adjusted his coat around her shoulders to keep out the icy wind. She glanced up at him, still frightened, still unsure, but his eyes never showed anger or cruelty. They only looked forward, searching for safety. Her thoughts battled inside her. Why was he helping her? Humans were supposed to be selfish, dangerous, violent. Her elders had always spoken of them as enemies. Yet this one had given her warmth when even her own people had abandoned her. She wanted to ask him why, but her voice failed, stuck in her throat with fear. They reached a small rise in the ground where a half-broken hut stood. Its wooden walls leaned as if they could collapse at any moment, but it was still better than the open night. The human pushed the door with his shoulder, and it creaked open with a low groan. He guided her inside, careful not to let the cold wind blow too much snow in. The air inside was stale, but at least it was still. The girl lowered herself onto the floor, clutching her pet. The human crouched down and began to work quickly, gathering pieces of broken wood from the corners. With skilled hands, he built a small pile and pulled out a strange device from his coat. She watched, her eyes wide, as sparks flashed. Soon, fire flickered, orange and alive, pushing back the shadows. The warmth touched her face. She gasped softly. It had been so long since she had felt fire. Her pet lifted its head weakly, its ears twitching toward the heat. The man fed the flame slowly until the small fire was steady. He sat back, resting against the wall, his face lit by the glow. For a long moment, silence filled the hut. The girl hugged her pet closer, her eyes fixed on him. Finally, her trembling lips parted. "Why?" she whispered. The man turned his head, his eyes meeting hers. "Because you're freezing, and so is that little one." His tone was simple, as if it was the most obvious answer in the world. She frowned, confused. "But I'm not human. I'm your enemy." He shook his head slowly. "Tonight, you're just someone who needs help. That's enough." Her heart pounded. She wanted to believe him, but fear still clung to her bones. She remembered the stories of humans burning villages, of humans fighting without mercy. Yet this man had built her a fire. This man had wrapped her in his coat. This man was keeping her alive. Her pet gave a soft sound, moving closer to the flames. The man reached out his hand carefully, offering it toward the creature. The girl stiffened, holding her pet tighter, but the little animal surprised her. It sniffed the man's fingers and then rested its head against his palm. The girl's eyes widened. Her pet, who trusted no one but her, was allowing him to touch it. The human smiled faintly. "See? It knows I won't hurt you." She bit her lip, looking down at the fire. A strange feeling stirred in her chest. Trust, a dangerous, impossible thing. She had been taught never to trust humans, but everything about this moment pushed against those lessons. He pulled a small pack from his side and opened it. Inside were pieces of dry food, strange but smelling warm and rich. He broke some and placed it gently on a cloth near her. "Eat," he said. Her stomach twisted with hunger. She had not eaten in days, only surviving on snow water. She hesitated, staring at the food. What if it was poison? What if it was a trick? But her pet crawled forward and took a tiny bite. It chewed, then looked up at her with brightening eyes. Safe. Her hands shook as she picked up a piece. She nibbled carefully. The taste was strange, salty, but her body welcomed it with desperate need. Tears filled her eyes as she ate. She had almost forgotten what food tasted like. The man leaned back against the wall, watching the fire. He did not push her to eat more, did not demand thanks. He just sat there, calm, silent, like a guardian in the dark. Her voice came out small, breaking the silence again. "What is your name?" He looked at her for a moment before answering. "Daniel." She repeated it softly under her breath, testing the human word. It felt heavy and strong. She hesitated, then whispered, "I am Lyra." Daniel gave a small nod. "Lyra, good. Now we're not strangers." The fire crackled between them. The girl felt something shift inside her. She was still afraid, still cautious, but something about speaking names made the space warmer. It was as if the cold outside had lost some of its power. Suddenly, a noise outside snapped through the air. Heavy steps, not Daniel's. Voices carried through the night, sharp and cruel. Lyra's blood froze. She knew those voices. Hunters, her people's soldiers. They were searching for her. Her hands clutched her pet tightly, her breath quick and shallow. Panic rose in her chest. If they found her here, they would kill her without mercy. And if they saw Daniel, they would kill him too. Daniel noticed her fear instantly. His eyes narrowed. He rose silently, stepping toward the door. His movements were smooth, practiced, like a man who had faced danger many times before. He placed a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. Lyra pressed herself against the wall, her pet hidden under the blanket. Her heart thundered as the hunters' voices grew louder, closer. She could hear them speaking her name, mocking, promising death when they found her. Daniel's hand rested on the weapon at his side. His eyes burned with sharp focus. The fire crackled softly, the only sound inside the hut. The night outside filled with danger. Lyra held her breath, trembling. For the first time, she realized her fate was no longer only hers. A human now stood between her and death. And she did not know if he could survive what was coming. The voices outside grew sharper. Lyra could hear the hunters calling her name, dragging their words through the cold air like knives. Their footsteps crushed the snow with purpose. They were close, much too close. Her body shook as she pressed herself tighter against the wall, clutching her pet under the blanket. The creature whimpered softly, sensing her fear, and she gently hushed it, terrified the sound might carry outside. Daniel moved slowly to the door, crouching low. He did not panic. His eyes were steady, scanning every shadow that slipped through the cracks of the broken hut walls. He placed his hand against the wood of the door, not pushing it open, but feeling the vibrations. His breath was silent, measured, like he had trained for this moment 100 times before. Lyra wanted to scream, to beg him not to move, but she could not form words. Her people had told her humans were dangerous fighters. She had never believed it before, but now, as she watched him stand ready, she saw something terrifying and powerful in his stillness. He was like a wolf waiting to strike. The hunters' voices grew louder. "She cannot be far," one of them barked. "Check every ruin, every hut." Another laughed cruelly. "The weak girl and her beast will freeze before dawn anyway, but I want her alive when we find her. Alive, so she can suffer." Lyra's blood turned cold. She knew those men. They had mocked her when her people abandoned her, calling her nothing but a failure. They wanted her to die slowly. If they found her here, they would not show mercy. Daniel turned his head slightly, his eyes finding hers in the dim firelight. He raised one finger to his lips again. Quiet. Then, with his other hand, he pointed toward the back corner of the hut. There, half hidden under broken boards, was a hole that led under the wall. A narrow crawl space, just enough for someone small to slip through. Lyra's heart pounded. He wanted her to hide. She shook her head, fear flooding her eyes. If she moved, they would hear. But Daniel's stare was firm, commanding yet calm. He was not asking. Survive. Her trembling legs obeyed. She shifted silently, sliding with her pet toward the hole. The blanket muffled the creature's soft whimpers. Her fingers scratched against the frozen wood as she crawled into the dark space. She turned once to look back. Daniel was already at the door, crouched low, his hand resting on his weapon. He nodded once at her, a silent promise. She bit her lip hard to stop herself from crying out. Then she slid fully into the shadows, pressing herself flat against the earth. The door of the hut creaked suddenly. Someone outside pushed it open. Lyra froze, her heart thundering in her chest. Through the crack, she could see the boots of 2 hunters stepping inside. Their voices were harsh, filled with cruel amusement. "Smell that?" one of them muttered. "Fire. Someone was here." The second chuckled darkly. "She's close. Very close." Lyra squeezed her pet tighter, her whole body trembling. She prayed they would not see the faint glow of its fur. She prayed the shadows would keep her hidden. Daniel stood silently in the corner, like part of the wall. His hood shadowed his face. He did not breathe loudly, did not move, only watched. The hunters stepped further in, their boots scraping against the wooden floor. One leaned over the fire pit, touching the embers. "Still warm?" he said. "She was here minutes ago." The other turned sharply, his eyes scanning the hut. For a terrifying moment, Lyra thought his gaze would fall on her hiding place. Her chest tightened, her breath stuck in her throat. Then, with sudden speed, Daniel moved. He slammed the door shut, the sound exploding in the silence. Before the hunters could react, his weapon was drawn. A flash of steel in the firelight. His fist struck the first man's jaw, sending him crashing into the wall. The second reached for his blade, but Daniel was faster, knocking the weapon away with a brutal kick. The hut filled with chaos. The hunters shouted, cursing, struggling. Daniel moved with deadly precision, every strike controlled, every motion exact. He fought not like a wild beast, but like a soldier who had trained his body into a weapon. Lyra's eyes widened from her hiding place. She had never seen anything like it. Her people had told her humans were weak, fragile, clumsy. But the man before her was none of those things. He was strength itself, holding back two armed hunters with nothing but his will and skill. The fight shook the small hut. Boards cracked, dust fell from the ceiling. The fire guttered under the rush of movement. Lyra's pet buried its head in her arms, trembling. She held it tightly, whispering soundless prayers, unable to look away. One hunter screamed as Daniel twisted his arm and sent him crashing to the ground. The other tried to stab him with a hidden blade, but Daniel caught his wrist, forcing it back with raw power until the weapon fell useless to the floor. Breathless and beaten, the hunters finally stumbled back. One spat blood, glaring at Daniel. "This isn't over, human," he growled. "More are coming." Daniel's eyes burned with quiet fire. He did not answer. He simply opened the door and shoved them outside into the snow with one final kick. They scrambled away, their shouts fading into the distance. Silence fell again. The hut creaked, the fire crackled weakly, and Daniel stood tall, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Lyra crawled slowly from her hiding place, her knees weak, her body trembling. She could not stop staring at him. Her voice broke when she finally spoke. You fought them, for me." Daniel looked at her, his expression calm but serious. "I told you, you don't die tonight." Tears filled her eyes. She hugged her pet tightly, her heart torn between fear and something she had not felt in so long, safety. Outside, the hunters' cries echoed faintly, promising they would return. But for now, inside the broken hut, Lyra and her pet were alive. And it was because of him. For the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, humans were not the monsters she had been taught to fear. The fire had almost died, its glow weak and flickering. Daniel placed another piece of wood into the flames, and the warmth returned slowly, spreading across the small hut. Lyra sat close, holding her pet in her arms. The creature was breathing softly now, no longer shaking as much. Its tiny body rested against her chest, glowing faintly under the blanket. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He leaned closer, not with anger, but with curiosity. The glow was weak but real, shining like pale blue light. "That's not a normal animal," he said quietly. Lyra's arms tightened around her pet. Fear flashed in her eyes. "Don't hurt it," she whispered. "Please, it's all I have." Daniel shook his head slowly. "I'm not going to hurt it, but you need to tell me. Why does it glow?" She hesitated. For a long time, silence filled the air. She looked at her pet, stroking its soft fur, as if deciding whether she could trust him with the truth. Finally, her lips parted. "It's not just a pet. My people call it a heart beast. They say it was a gift from the stars long ago. It carries a light inside it, an energy. Some say it can heal, some say it can protect, but many fear it." Daniel's brow furrowed. "And that's why they're hunting you." Her voice broke. "Yes, they don't want me to keep it. They said I was too weak to protect something so rare. They left me in the snow, hoping I would die and the heart beast would be taken by someone stronger." Her eyes filled with tears. But it never left me. It always stayed with me. Daniel looked at the creature again. It opened its dim eyes and gazed at him, the glow inside its small body pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat. He reached out carefully, placing his hand just above its fur. A faint warmth spread into his palm, gentle and alive. It felt strange, almost like the creature was sharing part of itself with him. Lyra watched nervously, ready to pull her pet back. But the animal did not resist. Instead, it leaned into Daniel's touch as if recognizing him. Daniel withdrew his hand, his face serious. No wonder they want it. If it's real, if it can heal or protect, it's more powerful than any weapon. Lyra shook her head quickly. It's not a weapon. It's life. It only shines when it feels love, when it feels safe. That's why it's weak now. It knows we're in danger. It knows I'm scared. She hugged it tighter, whispering to calm it. The faint glow dimmed further. Lyra's heart broke. It's dying, she whispered. Daniel leaned closer. Then we don't let it die. Not tonight. His voice was firm, steady, filled with determination. Lyra looked at him with wide, wet eyes. Why? Why do you care? You don't even know me. You don't know us. Daniel held her gaze. His voice was quiet but sharp with conviction. Because leaving someone to die in the snow is something I can't do. I've seen too much death already. I won't let it happen again. His words cut through her chest like fire through ice. For the first time, she felt something strange when looking at him, something that wasn't fear. The wind howled outside, shaking the hut. Daniel adjusted the fire again, keeping it alive. His mind worked quickly. We can't stay here. They'll come back with more men. We need to move before dawn. Lyra's eyes widened in panic. No, if we leave, they'll find us faster. They know these lands. They'll never stop hunting me. Daniel's expression hardened. Then let them come. I've survived worse. He checked his weapon, his movements sharp and efficient. Her heart pounded. She wanted to argue, to tell him it was hopeless, but the memory of how he fought earlier still burned in her mind. She had seen him fight 2 hunters with skill her people could never match. He had protected her when no one else would. Still, fear clung to her. She lowered her head, stroking her pet's glowing fur. If they catch us, they'll kill you too. Daniel crouched in front of her, his eyes steady. Then I'll make sure they don't. The words hit her harder than she expected. She searched his face, trying to find any sign of a lie, but all she saw was a human who meant every word. The pet stirred in her arms, its glow flickering faintly brighter, as if it understood the promise Daniel had made. Lyra gasped softly, realizing the heartbeast was reacting to him. Her voice trembled. It trusts you. Daniel looked at the creature, then back at her. Then we keep it alive, both of you. The sound of distant horns suddenly echoed through the night. Lyra flinched. She knew what that meant. The hunters were gathering. They had found the trail, and soon they would surround the area. Daniel rose quickly. We move now. Lyra hugged her pet close, her body shaking. She didn't want to leave the small fire, the fragile safety of the hut, but she knew he was right. If they stayed, death would come. She took a shaky breath, then nodded. Daniel helped her stand. She leaned on him, weak but determined. He pushed the door open slowly, scanning the snowy night. The cold wind bit at their faces, but the fire's warmth still clung faintly to their bodies. Together they stepped out into the darkness. The world was vast, white, and silent, but danger lurked in every shadow. Lyra clutched her glowing pet tightly, whispering, "Hold on, little one. Please, hold on." Daniel adjusted his grip on his weapon and looked into the distance where faint lights moved among the trees, torches carried by the hunters. His jaw tightened. He turned to Lyra. "Stay close to me, no matter what happens." She nodded, her fear mixing with a strange new feeling. For the first time, she wasn't only terrified of the hunters. She was terrified of losing him too. The heartbeast gave a faint pulse of light, brighter than before, as if answering Daniel's words. And in that moment, Lyra realized something. Her creature wasn't glowing from her alone anymore. It was glowing because of him too. Snow crunched under Daniel's boots as he led Lyra through the dark forest. The air was sharp, every breath burning in their lungs. Lyra held her pet tightly under the blanket, feeling its faint glow against her chest. Her legs were weak, every step a struggle, but Daniel never let her fall. His hand supported her, steady and strong, pulling her forward through the endless white. Behind them, faint shouts echoed. The hunters were coming closer. Their torches glowed between the trees, moving like fiery eyes. The sound of horns carried on the wind, warning the forest of the chase. Lyra's chest tightened with fear. "They're too many," she whispered. "We can't run forever." Daniel's eyes scanned the dark path ahead. "We don't run forever. We outsmart them." His voice was calm, but his mind was sharp. He had been in battles before, hunted before. He knew how soldiers thought, how they moved, how they searched. He studied the ground as they ran, leaving faint trails in the snow. Then suddenly, he veered off the main path, pulling her toward a rocky slope covered in thick roots and fallen branches. Lyra stumbled, gasping for breath. "Where are we going?" "To a place they won't expect," he said. The slope was steep, the climb difficult. Lyra's legs shook, but Daniel lifted her when she slipped, carrying both her and the pet at times. His strength seemed endless compared to her frail body. Even as the cold bit into his face, he moved with focus, as if nothing could break his will. At the top, a narrow cave hid between rocks and dead trees. Daniel guided her inside quickly, brushing snow from the entrance to hide their tracks. The cave was dark and cold, but at least the wind was blocked. Lyra collapsed against the wall, clutching her pet. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her body shivering with exhaustion. Daniel crouched near the entrance, listening. Voices shouted in the distance, echoing like wolves on the hunt. Lyra whispered shakily, "They'll find us. They always find me." Daniel turned his head, his eyes meeting hers in the dark. "Not if I don't let them." His voice was low, but the certainty in it made her heart beat faster. She wanted to believe him, but fear pressed hard. She stroked her pet gently, whispering soft words in her language. The faint glow flickered brighter, as if trying to reassure her. Minutes passed like hours. The hunters' voices grew louder, closer. Lyra froze at every crunch of snow outside. Her people's soldiers knew these lands well. They searched every cave, every broken tree, every ruin. If they entered, there would be no escape. Suddenly, one voice shouted, "Tracks! Over here!" Lyra's breath stopped. She clutched her pet tightly, praying they wouldn't see the hidden cave entrance. Daniel moved silently, picking up a handful of snow and rubbing it over the cave floor to erase any remaining prints. Then he crouched low, weapon ready. His face was calm, his breath controlled. He was not afraid. Lyra's body shook harder. She pressed herself against the cold rock, whispering, "They'll kill you if they find you. You should leave me. Save yourself." Daniel's eyes snapped to hers. His voice was sharp, steady, unbreakable. "I don't leave people to die." Her throat tightened. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever chosen to stay when it meant death. The hunters' torches glowed brighter through the trees. Shadows moved near the cave entrance. Lyra held her breath so tightly her chest hurt. Her pet whimpered softly, but she hushed it, tears streaming down her face. One hunter stepped close, his torchlight spilling against the rocks. "Tracks end here," he muttered. "Search." Lyra's heart raced wildly. She looked at Daniel, fear screaming inside her. But he only raised a hand slowly, signaling her to stay still, stay silent. The hunters began to move around the rocks, their boots crunching the snow. One of them stepped closer, lifting his torch toward the cave. Lyra squeezed her eyes shut, ready for the end. But Daniel moved before the light touched them. Silent as a shadow, he slipped out of the cave's side opening, circling around the rocks. The hunters didn't see him until it was too late. In a blur of movement, he struck the nearest one, pulling him down into the snow without a sound. The man collapsed, his torch falling and dying in the snow. Another turned, shouting in alarm. Daniel was faster, slamming him into a tree, knocking him cold. Lyra opened her eyes, gasping silently as she saw flashes of the fight outside. Daniel moved like the storm itself, silent but unstoppable. The hunters cursed, swinging their blades, but every strike missed. Daniel struck with precision, never wasting energy. Still, there were too many. More torches lit up the night, voices shouting as the rest of the hunters rushed forward. Daniel grabbed the two fallen men's torches and threw them far into the woods. The firelight vanished, leaving darkness to swallow the soldiers. Confusion spread. Some shouted orders, others stumbled blindly. In the chaos, Daniel returned swiftly to the cave. "Now," he said firmly, pulling Lyra to her feet. She stumbled, but he held her steady. Together, they slipped deeper into the forest, moving fast while the hunters shouted in the wrong direction, chasing false lights. Lyra's heart pounded against her chest. She looked up at Daniel as he guided her, and for the first time, hope filled her fear. He had fooled them, outsmarted them, when she thought all was lost. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "You fight like no one I've ever seen. You saved me again." Daniel didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. "I'll keep saving you until you're safe." Tears stung her eyes. She pressed her face against her pet, whispering, "Do you hear that? He won't leave us." The glow inside the creature brightened, stronger than before. The night was still long, the hunters still chasing, but something inside Lyra had changed. She no longer felt completely helpless. With Daniel beside her, the impossible no longer seemed impossible. And deep inside her chest, a fragile hope began to burn, glowing as faintly but as surely as the little creature in her arms. The forest grew darker as clouds covered the moon. Daniel moved quickly, leading Lyra through the twisting trees. Her body was weak, but his hand never let go of hers. Every time she stumbled, he lifted her up. Every time she slowed, he steadied her. The pet in her arms gave off a faint glow, lighting their path just enough to see. The glow was small, but it gave them strength. Behind them, horns echoed again. The hunters had realized they were tricked. Their angry shouts spread through the forest like thunder. Torches burned in the distance, dozens of them now. Lyra's chest tightened with fear. "They will not stop," she whispered. "They will keep coming until I am gone." Daniel glanced back once, his eyes sharp. "Then we make a stand." His words chilled her. She pulled his arm weakly. "No, there are too many. If you fight them all, you will die. You should leave me." But he turned and faced her, his voice hard and steady. "I told you before, I don't leave people to die. Not you, not your little one. If they want you, they go through me first." Her lips trembled, her eyes filling with tears. She had been abandoned by her own kind, left in the snow like trash. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever chosen her over their own life. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She simply stared at him, this strange human, this impossible protector. The glow in her pet's body pulsed brighter, as if it could feel Daniel's words too. Lyra looked down in shock. "It's responding to you," she whispered. Daniel didn't answer. His eyes were on the approaching torches. He guided her toward a cliffside, where rocks and fallen logs created a natural barrier. "Stay here," he said firmly, placing her behind the rocks. "Keep quiet. No matter what happens, don't come out." Her heart pounded painfully. "You can't face them all alone." He checked his weapon and tightened his coat. "Watch me." The shouts grew louder. The hunters poured into the clearing, their torches lighting up the trees. They spread out quickly, forming a circle, blocking every way out. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. There were at least 10 of them, maybe more. All armed, all ruthless. One of them stepped forward, laughing cruelly. "So, the little traitor hides behind a human. Pathetic." His eyes gleamed as he raised his weapon. "Give her to us, human, and maybe we'll let you live." Daniel stepped out from the shadows, his face cold as steel. "You'll have to take her from me." The hunters laughed. "Then you die tonight." The fight began in an instant. The first hunter charged, blade raised. Daniel moved faster, sidestepping and striking his arm with brutal force. The weapon fell, and Daniel's fist smashed into the man's jaw, sending him to the ground. Another came from behind, swinging wildly, but Daniel ducked low, sweeping his leg and knocking the man flat in the snow. Lyra pressed her hands against her mouth, watching with wide eyes. The clearing became chaos. Torches shook, weapons clashed, men shouted in anger and pain. Daniel moved like a storm, his strikes sharp, precise, every motion filled with power. He fought not just for survival, but with a fire that came from deep inside him. But there were too many. A hunter struck his shoulder with a blade, cutting through his coat. Daniel grunted in pain but did not fall. He twisted, disarming the man and slamming him into the ground. Another hit him across the back with a club. Daniel staggered but caught himself, turning and striking back with ruthless strength. Lyra's tears spilled down her face. She wanted to run to him to help, but his words echoed in her head. "Stay here. Don't come out." Her pet whimpered, glowing brighter and brighter, as if feeding off her fear and Daniel's determination. She pressed it to her chest, whispering, "Please, save him. Please, give him strength." Daniel's breaths came heavy now, his body bloodied but unbroken. He fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. Each hunter who came close was knocked down, thrown aside, beaten back. The ground was littered with broken weapons and groaning bodies. Finally, only 2 hunters remained. They circled him like wolves, eyes filled with hatred. One rushed in, aiming for his chest, but Daniel caught the blade with his bare hands, blood dripping down his fingers. With a roar, he twisted it away and struck the man down. The last hunter hesitated, fear flashing in his eyes, before fleeing into the woods. Silence fell. The torches flickered weakly in the snow. Daniel stood in the center of the clearing, chest rising and falling heavily, blood running down his arm. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with victory. Lyra scrambled from her hiding place, rushing to him with tears in her eyes. She dropped to her knees beside him, clutching his arm. "You're hurt," she cried. "You'll die if we don't stop the bleeding." Daniel looked down at her, his voice faint but steady. "You're alive. That's all that matters." Her heart broke at his words. She pressed her pet closer, and the creature lifted its head. Its glow burst brighter than ever before, wrapping around Daniel's wounds like light flowing into him. The bleeding slowed. His breath steadied. The impossible was happening. The heart beast was healing him. Lyra gasped, her eyes wide. "It's saving you," she whispered. Daniel gave a faint smile, his hand resting on her shoulder. "No, you're saving me. You and that little one." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she held him, the glow lighting their faces in the cold night. Around them, the hunters lay defeated, their threats silenced. For the first time, Lyra felt safe, not because they were free of danger, but because she knew, without doubt, that this human would never let her go. Her people had called him weak, fragile, unworthy. But tonight, she had seen the truth. He was stronger than all of them. Strong enough to fight for her, strong enough to make her believe she was worth saving. And in that moment, as the snow fell quietly around them, Lyra realized something that shook her heart. She was no longer afraid of dying. She was only afraid of losing him. The night slowly gave way to morning. The dark sky softened into shades of gray, and the first weak light of dawn touched the frozen forest. Snowflakes still drifted down, but the storm had calmed. The world was quiet again, except for the faint crackling of torches dying in the snow where the hunters had fallen. Daniel leaned against a rock, his breath heavy but steady. His wounds were closing, glowing faintly where the heartbeast's strange light had touched him. He looked tired, his coat torn, his hands bruised, but his eyes still burned with the same steady fire. Lyra knelt beside him, wrapping his arm carefully with a strip torn from her own clothing. Her hands shook as she worked, but her touch was gentle. "You shouldn't have done this for me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You nearly died because of me." Daniel looked at her, his voice low but firm. "I told you, I don't regret it. You're alive. That's all that matters." Her eyes filled with tears. She lowered her head, unable to look at him. She had been abandoned by her own people, rejected and thrown into the snow to die. Yet this man, a human, someone she was taught to fear, had fought for her, bled for her, nearly died for her. The little creature stirred in her arms, glowing warmly. It looked up at Daniel with soft eyes, then pressed closer to Lyra's chest. Its glow pulsed gently, filling the space with light that felt alive. Daniel's lips curved into the faintest smile. "It's stronger now," he said. Lyra nodded, stroking the creature's fur. "Because it feels safe again." She looked at Daniel, her tears falling freely. "Because of you." Silence hung between them, but it was not empty. It was full of everything that had been shared in the last hours. Fear, survival, sacrifice, trust. Lyra hugged her pet tighter and whispered, "If you had not come last night, we would both be dead." Daniel's gaze softened. "Then maybe I was meant to be here." Those words made her heart ache in a way she didn't understand. She stared at him, trying to find the right thing to say, but nothing came. Only silence and the sound of snow gently falling outside. The hunters did not return. Those who survived had fled into the forest, their courage broken. For now, there was peace. But Lyra knew it would not last. Her people would not stop searching for her. The heartbeast was too rare, too valuable. Sooner or later, more would come. She looked at Daniel, fear returning to her chest. "They won't give up. They will send others, stronger ones. I don't want you to die because of me." Daniel pushed himself to his feet slowly, his body still aching but his stance unbroken. He extended his hand to her. "Then we don't give them the chance. We move. Together." Her eyes widened. "Together?" "Of course," he said simply. "You're not alone anymore. You, me, and that little one. We stay alive. No matter what." Her throat tightened, her heart pounding painfully. She stared at his hand, then slowly placed hers in his. His grip was firm, steady, warm, so different from the cold she had lived in for so long. They stepped out of the clearing into the pale light of dawn. The forest stretched endlessly before them, vast and uncertain, but it no longer looked like a graveyard to her. With him beside her, it felt like a path. a path that led somewhere beyond fear. The snow crunched softly under their feet. The cold still bit at her skin, but Daniel's presence was like fire walking beside her. The heartbeast purred in her arms, glowing softly, brighter than it had in days. As they walked, Lyra's thoughts tangled inside her. She had believed her life was ending when she hugged her pet for the last time. She had whispered goodbye, ready to die in the snow. But then Daniel had appeared, like warmth breaking through endless winter. He had changed everything. She looked up at him as he walked, his tall figure steady, his eyes sharp on the horizon. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why did you really save me? You could have walked away." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he answered simply, "Because no one deserves to die cold and alone. Not you. Not anyone." Her eyes stung with fresh tears. She pressed her face against her pet's fur and, whispering softly, "He means it. He really means it." Daniel didn't ask her to explain. He just kept walking, his presence enough. The sun broke through the clouds slowly, spilling pale gold light over the snow. The forest shimmered, no longer cruel and dark, but glowing softly in the new day. Lyra felt her chest warm in a way she had never felt before. Hope. Real hope. For the first time in her life, she was not afraid of tomorrow. She was not afraid of the hunters, of the cold, or even of death, because she was not facing it alone. She glanced at Daniel again, her voice trembling. "I thought I had no reason to live anymore. But now—" She stopped, unable to finish. Daniel looked at her, his eyes steady and kind. "Now you do." The heartbeast's glow brightened, bathing them in gentle light. It purred softly, a sound that echoed like a promise. Lyra hugged it close, her tears falling, but this time they were not only from sorrow. As they walked into the sunrise, the world felt different. The snow no longer seemed endless, the forest no longer hopeless. There was danger still, yes, but there was also a future. Lyra whispered to herself, almost too softly to hear, "Not goodbye, not anymore." And for the first time, her words felt true.